Welcome back to the Let's Go podcast, where we want to connect you to the text, connect you to your calling, and encourage you as you live out a life as a disciple of Jesus. We say, love God, live like Jesus. Let's go. So today we want to start off with just, we got back from the Baptist General Convention of Texas meeting last night. So we're going to give you a full overview of everything that happened at that. Hunter?
That was a lot.
It was good.
There was very minor debate, which was really great.
And then it was done well.
Saw a bunch of people we love.
Yeah.
Our beloved Kyle Henderson. Got to spend some time with Kyle. That was great.
It was good to see Colin.
Yeah,
Lee and Susan Bush came, and we were in Abilene, Texas, and let me just say, it's a great place. It's a great place.
Yeah.
It's where I grew up. So,
It'll test your salvation for sure, Abilene.
Juan, what was your score on the carne asada breakfast tacos?
The breakfast burrito carne asada actually was very good. Meat was tender. Wasn't nervy like I get in some places. So it's like a meat with like a gravy sauce. It's really good. So
it's one of the tastes of my childhood.
I need our church to know that Juan lies about making conchas. And he keeps saying, I'm making these conchas,
You know, I was going to make some this week and said, I'm going to take some to Hunter, but now I don't know.
I don't know that I've ever seen Juan make a concha.
Do you know what a concha is?
I do, because he's made me one like 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
But that was years ago.
It was not 2 years ago.
Anyway,
okay.
We are here. We're in the last couple weeks here of our Abraham series, Life of Abraham, and we've been walking through, and we can see that Abraham's just, man, such a faithful guy. He always gets it right, right?
Yeah.
Not so much.
Yeah.
But we've really enjoyed walking and learning the lessons that we learned. And in 21, which was the text we had this week, we get, 7 verses that announce this child, and all is good until verse 8. And so we get then into Hagar and Ishmael getting sent away, and Sarah's not happy about what's happening with the kids. And so that was, there's a lot in this text again, the Treaty of Beersheba. So, Juan, Hunter, what do we want to talk about from this chapter of Genesis, chapter 21?
Well, I'd like to start just in verse 1 when it says, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah. And as I was preaching bilingually, the Spanish version says that he paid attention to Sarah.
Wow.
So looking at that Hebrew, that the action there that God took was almost like an intervention of stepping into that moment and saying, I know where you are, I know the promises that I've given you, and pretty much saying it's time, right? And they've been waiting for about over 20 years from when God said, I will make you into a great nation, until the birth of Isaac. And yes, there's been those moments where Hagar came in, Sarah tried to fix the moment, and that later plays into what you were talking about, that that struggle between Ishmael and the new baby Isaac. And I just love that fact, guys, that God steps in, right? He intervenes. He knows our what we're going through, our moments, our struggles, and he reminds us that through him, we have strength. We will be okay. Yes. And that's kind of where I pushed into my sermon this last Sunday, in how God just steps in and he reminds us that his grace is sufficient, that in our weakness and in our difficulties and our struggles, that's when God shows up. That's when God is great, and we see it and we trust it, and we have that peace. Which is great, which is awesome. So yeah,
that's a good insight, Juan. I just noticed that there is a similarity here as we get into the middle part of this text. Just perhaps some parallels back to Genesis 16, where Hagar is sent away, and the Lord finds her as she's leaving. And in the same way, we get into this situation here where Sarah sends Hagar away, and they're out in the wilderness, and God shows up again.
He shows up, steps in.
So, Hunter, you spent a good amount of time on that. What are your thoughts as we consider kind of just this story and this conflict between Hagar and Sarah, and how it plays out in a couple of different ways that we've seen in this like 10 or so chapters of Genesis.
Yeah, one of the things that we get to wrestle with in the text is the continued care for by God and blessing of Hagar and Ishmael by result of God's promises, but also their relationship to Abraham, who everyone who Abraham blesses will be blessed, and Abraham is grieved that Sarah says you need to send them away for real this time, and then you see this scene. So the last time that we started the Hagar Ishmael deal, Hagar's pregnant, and God is the God who sees her, and I'm thinking about God still being the God who sees her, but sometimes we think that the grace runs out. Like He's done this one great thing for me, and now I find myself in despair again. I've used up my token, like oh no, I had my one get out of jail free card, and now. And the Lord is gracious in that, and that didn't make the sermon, but like for me, it's like as the people of God, we need to know that I said sometimes we weep our way into His provision, and our tears are liquid prayers to the one who gave us tear ducts, and that's a gift. But I also just read this text and think that us as a church ought to be like God. We ought to imitate God in seeing people and meeting people in the desert when they're at that place where they have nowhere else to go. She sets her 16, 15-year-old son, whatever, under this tree, a bush, and goes a bow shot away and weeps, and he weeps. And it says she sobs, and then it says that the Lord heard Ishmael's cry. So he's weeping, they're weeping. It's this total despair. And then he'll be an archer, which is, fascinating little play on words there with bow shot and archer. But just this picture of weeping and God hearing them. And I think, so often when people come to us for help, they'll say this phrase, I just need $20 to get me to X. And $20, and I have family members that are like this. $20 will get me to here, and so it's like, okay, I'll give you $20, and then 2 weeks later, I just need $20 to get me to, and God isn't inching Hagar and Ishmael along the way with just a little bit of food to sustain them for one more day or half a day. He meets them at the point of total despair. We have nothing left. He meets them at that point and says, I'm going to restore you and give you a hope for a future. And the gospel does that for us. It restores us, gives us a hope for the future, and we as the church have an opportunity to meet people at that place when they need a well and say, we have a well that will never run dry, and meet those needs. And so I was challenged by that, and so I did not what's funny is I say I didn't spend a lot of time on the first half, but half of my sermon is on the first half.
Well, and I thought that specifically the two things you mentioned, and those were two of the things I wrote down that just really stood out, which is, we weep our way into His provision, that He hears us, but tears are liquid prayer. It brought to mind an image that I've seen floating around from time to time, but it sticks in my mind, which is just, it's just a piece of ruler paper, and it just says, Dear God, and then there are some drops on the page that, represent tears, and it says Amen. That's the whole image, and that image sticks out. But God hears our cry. It's powerful truth. And in this text, He meets Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness and hears their cry. You then talked a little bit, Hunter, about we need to be like, we could be the miracle that God is going to provide for someone in our midst. And I thought that was just a good reminder that wherever you sit on the scale of God and His work and the Holy Spirit's work in the world today, whether you believe he is actively doing miracles still in the world today, which I certainly do. Sometimes we get to be the thing that steps in and is the miracle for people.
Yeah.
And I thought that was
Well,
profound.
and sometimes, and this is one of those funny things where people be like, I've never heard an audible voice of God. It's like, yeah, but you've heard an audible voice from God, like in the wisdom of a friend who said, "Hey, here's the God wisdom over the thing that you're wrestling with." And God's voice often speaks through His body,
Through his body and through his word. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's an important, there's a lot we could talk a lot about on what is it, how do you hear God? What are the ways you hear God? But that's an important note to make.
Juan, so I was wrestling with in verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised, which is the impossible, improbable. And I had confessed to the church, like up to 3 years ago, I probably would have said, like, God, I probably would have said God can't do miracles anymore. Not God doesn't do miracles, and like God can't do, which we would say, God, or I would have had the qualifier, well, God can do whatever he wants to do, but God he doesn't do that anymore. He, just kind of lets the world go around. And just kind of wrestled with that tension of, man, I believe that because, number one, I'd never seen a miracle, and number two, sitting in that tension of me praying for for healing for somebody, and he might answer it, he might not. Sitting in that tension, I didn't like. I didn't like the pull of, I'm going to put this out of my control, put this in God's hand. And so I liked to be able to control the tension and keep it real tight of, I'm not going to pray for healing because he doesn't do that. I'll pray that whenever you don't get well, that you're strong enough to do that. And that's all that I would pray, instead of the full spectrum of, but God, like, our desire is that you would make this person well.
Yeah, and also we put ourselves in situations where we want to control, right? We want to control, like, for example, financially. I've never seen God show up because I've never been in financial situation, right? And we live in this world of comfort, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, right? To be prepared financially and to be prepared, your career, all of that, all that's wonderful stuff. But we are so comfortable that we don't see God show up. And then we hear stories about, just like we heard the story about Ukraine, and the pastors and the struggles that they're having through this war, or we hear about hermanos in Ethiopia or other parts of the world where they're constantly seeing God show up and doing these miracles. And it is easy to fall into that, well, I just don't see God. But also we have to think about where we are. It's just like we're so comfortable, we're so in that that pillowy environment that I just never see God showing up.
Well, we tend to sometimes, what would be the right word? Is it a coincidence or was it a miracle? We sometimes can try to explain away coincidences. I mean, Hunter, you shared when you were in college or you were going to college and you didn't have a penny to your name. You had a negative bank balance and you needed $300 or something. And this lady just showed up with $300. It was just exactly what you needed. And you can say, well, that's certainly a coincidence, but God provided for you exactly what you needed and not more and not less. Just a couple of weeks ago, my granddad was, and I think we need to share these stories. That's what I'm saying not just in the frame of, this was a coincidence, or like, and this is another one where you could say, is it coincidence or is it medicine? Is it science? What is it? But my granddad is 95 years old, and we're looking forward to seeing him in Houston in a couple weeks. And he's in and out of being really aware and not aware, but he's just been such a pillar in my life and a wonderful example of a godly man. And a bunch of us were really nervous because he was going in to have a surgery on a tumor that he had on his bladder, and we were just saying, he's 95 years old. His body may not be able to handle a surgery, And so some of us were just really nervous about it. And wouldn't have been surprised if there was a complication. But he went in for this surgery, and they went in there, and there was no tumor. They were just like, "There's not a tumor." They're like, "I don't know if what we saw on the scan, if it was a
Right.
blip, or if it was this or that." But it's like, we know we don't have much more time left with Papa. That's what I call him, John. But we know we don't have much more time left with Papa. But I was certainly nervous about him having a surgery. But what they were able to do, because the tumor wasn't there, they were able to get to take care of some things so that he has better quality of life right now, and he's going to be at Thanksgiving next week. And it was there a tumor, and it disappeared. I don't know, but it certainly was a grand coincidence. And I don't want to. I would rather say that God did something really cool in that moment. And sometimes we, at least in my growing up I would say I grew up in what we would call cessationism. In my background, that God doesn't. The miracles that Jesus did, they ceased with Jesus until now. So Jesus is not doing that. We call that cessationist. Kind of that the miracles cease to happen after Jesus. And certainly there can be things that are used, or stories and manipulation, and there's lots of danger around how we talk about this, just theologically, for people, so that when you do have someone and you pray for a miracle and you believe in God for the miracle and the miracle doesn't come, we have to have confidence that God can do anything, but he doesn't. And then when he comes to Sarah, God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. A miracle. Right? He provides a lot of time. Miracles are providing what we need, not always more, not always less.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Juan, what did you sort of focus in on mostly in this text? Did you stay in the kind of beginning of it, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, I read through it and just kind of, leaned into how God showed up with Sarah, and God shows up with Hagar, and also God showed up with Abraham, because that moment, I don't think when Sarah wanted to get rid of Hagar, I don't think that was his plan. I don't think his plan was to, because
Again,
Yeah.
the matter, verse 11, the matter
Verse 11,
distressed
yeah.
Abraham. I think his plan was to raise Ishmael alongside with Isaac. But when Sarah was like, get rid of her, he didn't know. God says, you got to just listen to Sarah. Ishmael is also there, like, my dad just abandoned me.
Yeah.
My dad threw me away. I just imagine a 13, 14-year-old kid, and we have kids that go through that all the time. I've been thrown aside, and it's just those moments of emotional damage, of physical damage that we're seeing here, and just the struggle that they were having. And God just showed up and said, "Hey, Ishmael, your dad maybe threw you away, but I'm not. I'm not going to throw you away. I'm here for you." That was really good.
Really interesting detail, right?
So
About
good.
the bow shot away. She left the child, a bow shot away, and then it says, in verse 20, that God was with the boy, and as he grew up, and he lived in the desert and became an archer. I just love those little details here in the text. Was there anything, guys, that just didn't make it? We're kind of just toward the end of this discussion, but is there anything that you would have liked to have spent a little bit of time on, something burning from this text that just didn't make it into this week's message?
Yeah, I think another just take on the verse 11 that I had mentioned briefly is I mean, it could have been its own sermon, that there are things that you that God calls you to let go that you don't want to let go, and it greatly distresses Abraham, and so God met him in this place of distress and says, "It's okay, like you can let that thing go." And sometimes God calls us to let things go. Sometimes God permits us to let things go, and just this whole kind of world of letting something go, and it's not a bad thing. And so there's that, and then Ishmael. mocking Isaac, which is just another word for he laughed at Isaac, but it's a type of laughing. And so just like this continual laughter, and could have been a nice little deal on its own.
Yeah.
Would have been interested by. There's an angle that I in hindsight, I'd be interested to go back and preach the text again with just from the Hagar Ishmael angle all the way through the text, which we don't really have time to think about this, and I have not fully formed these thoughts, but just this we were joking, I think, before we started recording that, like, man, Abraham he lies a lot. He really is lying, and I think that I have this view of Abraham that he is this he's actually not a great guy, but I also think that that's only in comparison to me expecting him to be perfect, and he just is not perfect, and that is not the prerequisite for being.
The great arch of this story is, like you said, God stepping in to Abraham's mistakes and Abraham's shortfalls to kind of correct the path and say, no, I'm going to bless you. Yeah. Anything that didn't make it into yours, Juan?
Well, I would have loved to have poured into that the sobbing part of it, and you guys already mentioned it. How God hears our cries. And it doesn't have to be a word. It doesn't have to be something that we're, God, I need to articulate this one thing so to make sure that you're hearing it.
I have to clearly explain how I'm feeling and why I feel that way. God's the divine counselor. He needs me to process with him. It's like, no.
Yeah, and God's just there. He's listening, and that was good.
So good.
We need to understand that. So yeah.
There's so many rich lessons in these, 10, 11 chapters that we're walking through, and we've got 2 more Sundays, correct?
One more.
Last one. And this is the big finale. We're going to have a bilingual combined service on Sunday together. Hunter's preaching in both first and second service. And this is the story everyone's familiar with, at least most people who have studied Abraham. And you study this as a child. This is one of those stories, these texts that we're real familiar with. And so we'll look forward to seeing you guys there for that. But and your take on it and how the Lord kind of guides you to bring this text to us, Hunter. And so, we're excited. And then we have Worship Fiesta tonight. We're filming this a little later, so it'll come out a little later in the week. But we are looking forward to tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite days of the year.
Yeah.
So
get ready for the tacos.
Is a taco a sandwich?
No, dude.
Oh, stop.
We don't need to do this
Or is
anymore.
it? No. Okay.
It's a taco.
We had a debate about that yesterday.
We don't need to.
You were on my side of that debate.
I was,
yesterday,
but the people don't
but
need this.
you changed it. Okay.
The people don't need this.
It was a good conversation.
It's not edifying to our church.
So let us know. Do you think a taco could be a sandwich?
No.
Think about it. Just think
I am.
about it. Okay, we're gonna what? Were
to close,
I
I finished with the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
And Luke 15, and there's these 2 sons, and we see this 2 sons motif a lot in Scripture, and just move, and the same way that I'm moved by the despair of Hagar and Ishmael, and it breaks my heart, and they're sobbing and they're weeping and all that stuff. I'm so moved by the love of the Father in Luke 15 as while the prodigal was a long way off, ran to him and opened his arms. And for me, the imagery was God opens Hagar's eyes and she sees a well of water that brings life. And God opens the Father's arms and the Son sees an embrace that leads to life. And we have a God that leads us to new waters and leads us to new relationships and leads us to new life. And that is really great news. For us and for our body and for our community. And so that's my closing thought.
Amen. That's good stuff. Well, we will see you guys next week after this one. And this is Let's Go Podcast. And so we just want to say goodbye. Love God.
Live like Jesus.
Serve others.
Vamos.
Let's go.
Is a torta a taco?
Bye, everybody.
Sandwich.
That is a sandwich.